Thank you for joining us today. I'm Ashley Limbers, the marketing lead here at Encompass Solutions. At Encompass, we specialize in ERP consulting and implementation to help manufacturers solve challenges, streamline their operations, and drive growth. And as a premier partner of Epicor, we deliver tailored ERP solutions that empower businesses to succeed. We are headquartered in North Carolina and have been in business for over 23 years, with just over 40 staff members around the globe. And our focus is on manufacturing and distribution, primarily using Epicor software. One characteristic that makes Encompass Solutions stands out is that we're very partner focused. We have almost 20 years of experience selling Epicor software while being part of their premier partner program. We have a certified team of consultants that partners with businesses like yours to help with ERP implementations, software enhancements, customizations, and reporting. And today we're diving into GL reporting with Rick Ondrasik, leading our discussion. A couple of quick things before we dive in. We are recording today's session, so we'll email a copy of the recording to you. And if you have any questions during the presentation, please type them into the question box on your Zoom control panel, and we'll get to them during our Q&A session at the end. And don't forget to fill out the survey after today's event. Our speaker today, Rick Ondrasik, has been working with Epicor and its forerunner Platinum software since 1989. He's helped over 150 companies across various industries with Epicor, handling both financial and operational aspects. And with an MBA in accounting and marketing and numerous industry certifications, Rick has been a key member of our team since 2003. So with that, Rick, I'll go ahead and turn it over to you.
Hey, good morning. I saw a few lists of people sign up, so I may have interacted with some of you over time. Welcome. We're going to discuss basically the built-in financial report writer that comes with Epicor in its financial section. It's a basic one, but it can provide you with fundamentally GL-driven types of reports from your accounts, general ledger account values. It basically comes with a wizard to provide and at least start an income statement and a balance sheet. Basically, you can customize these to a degree. It's not one of these all-purpose, real heavy-duty ones, but it can give you your basic reports, and we have a number of companies that do that. We're going to discuss the financial reports, basically what the components on these are, limitations. I'll provide a slight demo, and then we'll answer any questions afterwards. I think there was a poll question, but it's not pulling up. I'll let Ashley worry about that.
Yep. So our poll question is, what is your biggest challenge when it comes to reporting in Epicor? So do you have difficulty customizing financial reports, limited visibility into real-time data, manual data consolidation and exports? Maybe it's a lack of training or understanding of reporting tools, or are you very satisfied with all of your reporting? So we'll just give you a few seconds here and see how we fared out.
Doesn't look like anyone's satisfied with their current reporting.
No surprise there. All right, 5 more seconds, and we'll go ahead and end the poll. All right, Rick, what are you seeing percentage-wise on when it comes to reporting challenges?
Well, it looks like the biggest one, I don't know if everyone's seeing it, but the biggest one is lack of training or understanding of the reporting tools in the system. And it looks like it's followed with difficulty of customizing financial reports. And no one is satisfied, so not surprising. You can always improve reports.
Yep, you're in the right place. So perfect. All right, you can continue. Thank you.
So I just click the stop sharing, or are you controlling that?
You should be good to
go. Should I click share results, or that's fine? Okay.
You can X out of it if it's still showing on your screen.
Okay, financial report designer in Epicor. Um, just showing a couple of screens. This would be like your designer screen or your reports. Fundamentally, the key structure in the system is you create a column set, which means you could have 1, 2, 5, 12 columns wide. For example, if you wanted to see a breakdown of, let's say, your income information per month, you could actually break it out over 12 months on the report. Um, the report basically structures it. If you look on the right side, it's going to come out looking in basically a spreadsheet type format, even in the PDF output. Nothing fancy. You can take these and these reports because of the structure of Epicor using SSRS reporting in the system. You could put these directly into an Excel spreadsheet. People do that. They'll set up a structure where they can make it look a lot nicer, put things, even logos on it, or if they want things like that. But you could use these to create a basic income statement or a balance sheet. And basically your structure in this case was basically account number, assets, year to date. You could have other additional information on these if you wanted. Well, actually, I'm sorry, this was a balance sheet here. But anyways, the idea, whoops, I go too fast with that. Anyways, the structure is very simple. Once you get familiar with how it works, if you're making a really more involved report, it could get a little tedious where it's just detail work setting it up, but it's not difficult once you get the idea. Basically, you set up your columns like this one here, account description, current year to date. And then your rows would be your headings, such as assets, current assets. It could have totaling and so on as you structure it through. There's like a wizard-driven balance sheet and income statement. Basically, you can define multiple structures. You can use the wizard to develop, let's say, your basic balance sheet, but you could flesh it out with more breakdowns, detail, totalings. You could also use it then to drive it into, again, like I said, an Excel sheet, where you could then use that to do more detailed or involved formatting and so on. If nothing else, and as pointed out, you could use it as a reconciliation for any other external reporting that you're doing. Like I said, you could have multiple periods. You can do a month to month or a year to date. You could year to year comparisons, rolling periods. You could structure it to give you a quarterly or a period or whatever. You could do comparatives, current to last, this year to last year. If you're maintaining budgets in the system, you could then even do it with a budget comparison or a budget printing. One thing I'll point out in the demo or the information, we're working with our demo environment, which is basically limited data. I'll be actually showing some data I found from 2018. But the nice thing is you can define what periods in years, whenever you want to view this data as well. Just to go over a few recap on the structure in Epicor. In Epicor, you have what's defined as a book. The book is what basically is a structure that's holding all your transactions in the database. Depending on how involved or your structure is, you could have more than one book. For example, if I had a large company with let's say the holding company on top with a bunch of children companies, each child company would have its own book where it does its own transactions. It could have what's called a secondary or intermediate book, which would then move the transactions into a format that's common to everyone. And then the holding company then could get the transactions in the structure it wants without interfering with the day-to-day transactions that occur in your independent or your smaller companies or child companies. Within the book, again, tied to it is your general ledger, and then the chart of accounts and so on. So all that activity the activity happens in the book. The chart of accounts is the definition of your accounts. In each of the accounts are account categories, or I should say they're tied to categories. For example, a cost of goods sold category would have certain account numbers tied to it. An asset category, like a current assets, would have cash or accounts receivable perhaps tied to that category. And what the categories do, besides just giving an organization and the structure of the chart, when you use the financial report writer, it will allow you to use these categories as a way of summing or totaling sections of accounts, or identifying sections of accounts if you only want to report certain ones. So the categories, and I'll do a quick shot of that in the system just to flesh that out a little more. There's the standard fixed accounts, and you have dynamic segments in Epicor, which can also be utilized for the reporting. If you're not using dynamics, just think of them as additional additions that are not in the formal chart, but I can use them when I post so that I can create these reporting off those postings. An example of a dynamic segment would be a company, like a customer ID. When I do an invoice posting, for example, if I had the dynamic segment of the customer ID defined and had it defined to work with the postings, when I do any of my accounts receivable postings, for example, after I've done an invoice, it would tie that customer ID to that posting, which then would give me a way to would do more detailed information, let's say identification on the general ledger reports, if I want to see that there. Now, there are other ways to get that information, but some people want to see that in the accounting. Utilize your fiscal periods. And then if we maintain budgets, some people do, some don't, but if you do in the system, you can use those as for comparatives or even just to do a printout of the budget. Okay, now Epicor will only report data that is posted to the general ledger and the budget, which is actually sort of tied to the accounts for the general ledger accounts. It's not an all-encompassing report writer that would go and look at inventory data, for example, and associate it with it. However, it will give you your very clear accounts, postings and so on. It'll pull them through and show them. Give me a chance. I may have to shrink this and I gotta limit this. I'm not used to using Zoom, so bear with me a second. There we go. Okay, hopefully you can see my screen now. Give me a second, I have to move these controls out of the way. Okay, if everyone's hopefully everyone's using the current version of Kinetic. If not, the screen a little different. I think one company I saw that was potentially going to be on this demo is still using the the modern version or classic version. However, the functionality is still basically the same. When you're working with the financial, these items, you can either pull them up here with a search, or you can go down and look at the sections like under general ledger. We have the setup. We would look at here and we would find financial report designer, which I have open already, so I'll just leave it open, but you'd click here and open it up. The one thing I am going to show though is the account segments. if I can spell. And from those who have done some of the work on the accounting area, you'll notice you have all these different account segments. The account segments, when you define them, if I can pull this up, in this case, the cash segment is the natural account is 1,000 for the cash regular checking. The key here for our report designer, or it helps with it, is that we would define this and attach it to a category called current assets. I can then, when I create my report, say, well, give me a total of the current assets. And all the accounts will list out, and then if I want the detail, and it'll then give me the total for the current assets, or allow me to, without having to go and identify every account number or define the account number range. Now, most people try to use the categories. You can, if you want, you could get very detailed and tell it, well, I only want to use accounts 1,000 to 1012 or something. I don't want any others included in my totaling. I can define it in my report, and I would ignore the categories. But that's the purpose of these categories. One of the key ones that ties it to the financial report writer. I will mention that these are often used also by some of the third party or other report writers for Epicor's more advanced ones. So basically, when you define your account segments, you want to basically use your categories. Now, the categories, when you build Epicor, it will have a number of its default ones that typically you'll tell the system to create when you create your chart of accounts. You can use those, but you can also add different ones. For example, this one here, net income balance sheet use, is one that's been added. I don't think it's still not being created automatically by the system, but many people put that in there. So you can create your own categories. You just have to be aware then that when you're setting these up, when I do, let's say the templates that they have, the wizards, they will not know about your account, your categories, but you can then manually go in and work, set it up and work with them. Get out of here. Okay, so if looking at the report designer, okay, now this is in the setup, and when you set up a report, you're going to have different reports that you can work with. You have to bear with me. I have like a thing sitting on my screen. And I'm working in the browser version. Some of you may still have your server on site, so you'd be working with an on-premise version. I'm going to show this. I did create one, like a sample of how you can just do a little simple one of your own. And then I'll go into the templates or the wizards. But for example, I mentioned when I set up my account sequences or my report, I can tell, well, when I set up a row, and again, like I said, there's a column structure, and then you have rows that define what actually populates it. In this case, I'm saying, well, I have a row here. I want to select the category. Okay, so my category is going to be sales expense. I could pick any category when I set up my rows that display. And what would happen is if I had 10 accounts that were in sales expense, for example, it would pick them up and put them into this category on this row. And I'm telling it I want to total it, and I will total it to a name. Now, this is something you define. It's like a variable. So when I say I have these 10 accounts and they equal 40,000 bucks, it'll then total them and put 40,000 in this value. And I will use this then to print it out on my report. So there's a little training, a little time to work with it. And this is not a training session, but I'll give you an idea that you can set up how you want this to display and with what information and what way. I could have also said, I want to select accounts. Now, I don't know all the accounts offhand, so I'm not going to try and do that. But I could then put this in here. I could even use segments. So, for example, all I'm worried about is a certain segment, like segment 05. I could have defined that if I had one like that, or I can define specific accounts. So it gives you an amount of flexibility here if you want to get into that kind of detail. Give me a second. When I'm in my financial report designer, now I have a few here. These are the default ones that came with the sample demo company. When you just build them, sometimes out of scratch from the demo environment. There's a one I created that's called an education balance one. There's an education P&L. That was that sales one I was looking at where I'm defining some rows. I'll go into the definition here briefly. When I define my sales ID, and I could have multiple, I could even have different reports for different years, or I may want to put different column sets, which we call column sets here. I'll have my sales report ID. I'll have a description, and this would be my title, sales info. Or I could change it to sales expense info or whatever. I think I set this one up just to show expense accounts. When you define the book, it'll also pull in the chart that the book is tied to. Typically, or I'd say most people only have one book, so they don't worry about it. But if you do have a large enough company with multiple books, or some people actually have like a depreciation book, you may decide to determine which book this is pulling from. We create what's called a column set. That was that RO sales. I created one with the account number. My first column is going to be account. Second is going to be description. And the third is going to be sales expense. And these are the titles I gave it. If I look in more detail, this is where I define my accounts, or I should say my columns. So in my column, I'll pull up, for example, the account one. Okay. I have my column set ID, which is RO sales. And again, you can create as many as you want. My title here is account. I could change it. This is what you choose as a title. And on the column type, this is where you're going to tell it, what am I dealing with? In this case, I'm telling it, pull in the account number. I could bring in the actuals. This is where I would tell it, bring in my budget number, which would be tied with this account number, then I would drive them all. Do I have a comparative percentage? Crossfoot, report categories. If you're using the statistical values, the general ledger does allow you to attach statistical values or quantities or unit of measures. You can bring those in on a column. Text, for example, the description of the account, variances, and your yearly values. So you define then what that column type is, and that will then tie that information to the account number and display it in that column. The column intervals, well, what are they going to be? In this case, it's by period, but what periods am I doing? Okay, I could say 1 period. I could have, 3 periods or 6. So you can vary like if you want to do some kind of quarterly reporting or a breakout by quarters, you could do that. I can also put in what kind of variances and so on. I'm not going to get that involved in this description now, but that gives you the flexibility to do those kind of things. Oops, let me go back to here. The other building block in here is going to be your rows. So I have a row down here, line number, and I just took and this is any defined line number. Basically, I cut and pasted it from another report. This is another thing you can do is if you've got an existing report, or I just took this from the Wizards income statement, I could take this and cut and paste my rows, and then I can modify them. I could change the line number, things like that if I want once it's in there. What I did here, and this is the idea of how the rows work, I'm going to have a heading line. So what it'll do is display sales expense. Then I'm going to want my details. Now, my description, I put same sales expense. I'm saying totaling it to that named sales expense. Now, again, when we define it, we're looking at that category, and we were telling it on the columns. So it's going to look at the sales expense and put it here. It will then total it and give me my total expenses as this breakout here. So your basic structure is you do some of the definition. I can say, well, I want a heading that's going to have, font 14 size, make it bold. You can italicize it. So it gives you some structuring. But like I said, I think a lot of people usually put it into an Excel sheet and then format it to how they want to exactly see it. And again, your base structure is going to be a column set tied to the rows. Now your rows typically will stay here, but your column sets, if I had more than one, I can pick which one I want to use with that set of rows. And I'll display it when we do a print a report. It'll see how that displays out. Now I have a couple of set ones here. I'm just going to demonstrate, and I'll create a new, let's say a new P&L. Give you an idea when I was setting up some testing to make sure the system worked right to display it. In this case, we have education P&L. Again, that's the title I gave it. We have 3 column sets. I can do either a budget count set, which gives me account description, budget, variance, and so on. And as you can see, I can take these columns out. This one goes out to 8 headings, but you can go out to fundamentally 20. If you wanted to, like I said, I've seen some people do breakouts where they have 12 periods with maybe totals and stuff. My columns, in this case, as I do each one, will define which ones are making up that column. If I went down to the standard one, you can see it has less than it did on the budgeted one. In this case, it's account description, percentage sales, year to date, and so on. My rows pretty much will stay the same on any of these. And this is where I'm defining, in this case, it's a total Eurofin analysis. This was one that I think someone created. It's not standard in the set. There's a heading line, accounts, details. This is where it's going to bring in the information of each line within that grouping. It's going to total it to cost of goods sold in this case. And then it'll also then continue a total. Now this one will not display on the print, but I'm sort of like, I've got a cost of goods sold, but I'm going to be adding more things to my gross profit value. So I create a variable, sort of like in algebra, and I'm adding this to this. I'll go down here and I'll have an additional spot where I'm going to bring it in. And then ultimately I total everything against gross profit here. So this value sort of you'll keep adding things to it as you go through it. Again, I'm not going to get into fine details, but you have a chance to set up, let's say, accumulating variables where as you're moving through and you do each section, you're going to take a total and then add it to it so that at the end, I'll have a grand total. Wait a second. Now, if you're using like the more classic screen, you'll just do the new over here. In this case, we're working with the kinetic screen. Basically, you do your new button is here. On report ID, we'll call it May 13 P&L. or wherever we want. Again, our environment, this is just the demo environment, has a number of different books. You'd probably only see one in most cases. Master chart of accounts will show up, or whatever you've named your chart of accounts. The report title is could be when I say P and L, whatever you want it to be. My heading, we'll make it 14, or we'll make it 16. We'll bold it and italicize it. We'll leave the rest of the reporting in a 12 size font. Now, I haven't defined any column sets. And like I said, I could go and create them like I did in that little sales one. In this case, though, we're going to go to the ellipses. This would relate on the standard screen or the old screen as actions. And in this case, you have a couple things here. Notice deleting report, import definition. If you already had another report you wanted to export and bring in. Okay. In our case, where did it go? Bear with me, I'm missing something here. And I'm missing something on my screen. Bear with me 1 second. Give me a second. I'm going to get out of Designer and back in. Okay. There's a wizard template that's not pulling up at the moment. And I just loaded this particular one, and there would be a template that would come in here. I'm just going to stay with the one I created just a little while ago. The template basically will create this structure that we looked at and bring in the column sets. And I'm not sure why I'm getting that. Let's see. I'm going to try one more time. There it is. I don't know why it didn't show up initially. Report wizard. When you pull it up, it gives you a basic choice between an income statement and a balance sheet. We'll do the one with the income statement. It says it creates standard columns and rows. And after running it, you can fill in account ranges if you need to, things like that, or change them. So once I've created this income column set, you notice it now filled this with the 3 different standard ones that are there. It also created all your columns. Again, you could add or modify what's in these columns and in your rows. And again, there's more definition that goes in these things. You could, like, for example, if you did use dynamic accounts, you could flag it to say, include dynamics and stuff like that in there. Once I've got it in, I'm just going to save it. This structure itself is already designed to pull data through, and we're going to try that now. I'll go to the report section, or I could pull it in through the search. I'm going to go to financial reports. And at this point, I'll pick the report I want to run. So again, if you've recreated more than one statement or something, you bring it through. In this case, we have this May 13th P&L. And again, I could pick what column set do I want. I'm going to just use the standard one. It's going to give you a chance to say, I want anything that has a 0 balance. It doesn't default to it, but you could say, well, if I've got accounts that don't have a balance, print them anyways. You could have carry forward balances. Mostly good at the beginning of the year. I'm going to use the year 2018 because, like I said, our demo set from Epicor had limited data earlier or past that. And I know that period 2 had something for the data that we could pull in. You have your filtering when you do these. Again, if you had more than one book, you could say do all books or just do one. Do all companies if you have multiple companies, or one, depending on how you defined it or want to see it. In advanced, I can do my output. In this case, we're going to use the SSRS output. You can put it out into a PDF format. You could put it into an Excel sheet. You could do it in a CSV if you wanted to bring it in and bring the raw output into a pure spreadsheet form. Or even some kind of other documented reading form with the CSVs. Once you have that, and I think I've got it there, and I hope I have the right period, I'll just do a print preview. Now I'm sort of in a browser view, which I didn't have it totally set for. This case, though, I'm going to say I'm printing this. This is version 2. And I'll just open it from here, hopefully. This is my basic output. Epicor Education, webinar P&L for period ending 2/28/218. And it's going to show my categories or my periods. So it's current period. Again, I don't have a lot of good data, so you may not see any kind of percentages, but you can see I have my current, my year to date, flows down. And again, this is what we've out of just basically that template generated this output. Like I said, you can modify these lines. If you had other categories, you could break them out, or even tell it to do specific count numbers within these areas. As we go down, we're looking through our count numbers. There's a manufacturing expense section. We broke that out with the category. We told the row to tell that. And as we get down to the very bottom, we had a total net loss that does not look very good. Year to date, not so bad, I guess. But the idea is it'll give you your totaling. So in here, I told it total my G&A expense, my total expenses, what's my net income. Again, this is all goofy data from the demo environment. It gives you an idea, though, what it'll generate out. And again, if we had more columns, it would list them all out also. Now, I could, if I wanted to, put it into a spreadsheet, and we'll give that a shot here. This May P&L. Okay, instead of doing PDF, I'm going to tell it, let's do data only. Make sure it's SSRS. And we got it. And I'm gonna have to put it in here like this, pull it up. And in this case, I told it, give me my data only in the spreadsheet format. And so I have a spreadsheet now. I could work within the spreadsheet. So if I wanted to format this differently, do some kind of analysis, total sections and put them to the side or something, I could do that. Oops. We'll save that one. And just to demonstrate, I created that one little dinky, not dinky, but it's a sales expense report separate from the, like a breakout almost of the standard report, the income statement. So I picked this one. I'm using the standard column set, but I could use, in this case, I'm going to define it to use my RO sales. I created a separate column set. So again, you can pick and choose these column sets you want to use if they apply. In this case, I'm going to use the 2018 again. And I'm just going to do this one to PDF. Notice you have your other options. You can put it into Word or something else as well. And now this was my simplified one we did for period sales info. So all I wanted to do is I want to just analyze my sales expenses. And I didn't care about the percentage, anything else. All I want to know is what were my numbers for our expenses for February. And then I got my little breakout. And there's my totaling at the end. What I did in effect was when I set up this row structure, I said, all I want is the sales expense category, basically. And that's where the categories come in. And so at this point, any questions? Guess we'll open it up.
Yeah, just a reminder, if you have any questions, please be sure to type those into the Q&A box on your control panel. And